Hello, my name is Yura and welcome to another Baldur's Gate 3 build video. In today's video I'd like to show you my Mindbreaker Knight, which will be an Eldritch Knight multiclass again, which is going to focus around doing weapon attacks to gain arcane acuity and then casting enchantment and illusion spells to debuff our foes while also lowering their success chance with the mental fatigue debuff. So let's get into the character creation. So for our race, I've chosen a Githyanki. I just thought it was appropriate, but you can go with really any other race. Githyanki are my favorite because of their racial spells. They're quite amazing. They get a free Misty Step. They also get the Astral Knowledge, which gives them proficiency in a skill of a chosen ability. So you can basically have proficiency in Charisma anytime you want with dialogue. So you don't have to worry about having generally any proficiency with that. But also, they're great for example, I believe lockpicking, because they can help you with this as well. Then we, for level 1, get a Githyanki Psionics Mage Hand, so we get a Mage Hand for free. We have the standard racial speed, and then we have the Martial Prodigy. We don't need to worry about this because we already are a fighter, so we have proficiency with all weapons and all armors. But it's nice to have medium armor proficiency and then all short, long, and great swords. For class, we're going as a fighter. This is going to give us the second wind ability, which is a 1d10 plus your fighter level heal. So it's going to be a +1 at level 1, which is a nice one. It's kind of a substitute for a potion. You can use this instead of a potion, or you don't need to use it at all. It's up to you, especially in the late game. In the late game, you're probably better off just drinking a potion of healing, one of the big ones, right? But anyway, for the fighting style, here you have a choice as always. You go defense if you want extra armor class, but personally I would suggest going with the great weapon fighting because we are going to be going for a longsword, or even you can use great swords, 2 great swords if you're going to choose a Githyanki. Otherwise you would need a disguise self, but if you are a Githyanki already, you don't need to worry about that. But what great weapon fighting does, it's when we roll a 1 or a 2 on a damage die for an attack with a two-handed weapon, that is melee two-handed weapon, the die is re-rolled once. So it should reduce your chances of rolling low damage with your great weapons. For the background, I'm going with Guild Artisan. This is just my favorite background to pick. You can go with anyone you may prefer. It's completely up to you. But I like this one because it gives us insight and persuasion. Insight is nice because there's quite a few important insight roles in the game. Persuasion is generally the one that pops up the most when you are in dialogues. For the ability scores, we have 17 strength, 14 dexterity, 16 constitution, and 10 intelligence. Now, since we are an Eldritch Knight, 10 intelligence is quite low, but we are going to counteract that with the Helmet of Arcane Acuity and, of course, the Mental Fatigue status effect. On top of that, we will be increasing it potentially twice. Once, it's going to be up to you for the second one, but once we're going to be increasing it with the Mirror of Loss. 17 strength, self-explanatory. It's our main combat stat. It's going to help us with mobility as well as dealing damage and accuracy with our weapons, melee weapons. Dexterity, we want namely for the initiative and the +2 armor class, because you can wear actually one specific armor with this, which is a medium armor, which is going to help you negate one of the debuffs you will have from one of the items you can carry, specifically revolving around psychic damage and mental saving throws. And lastly, Constitution 16, since we'll have a relatively low armor, if we go with the medium armor, having higher Constitution is great, and also help us with the concentration saving throws. For these skills, I went with Perception, if you can go with always, is the best because it's basically everywhere for hidden levers, buttons, and so on. So I think it's a very important one to have on your characters. History and animal handling are kind of bad because there aren't too many roles for this, so I would ignore these. Acrobatics and athletics, you can choose either or. I went with athletics. And then intimidation we don't need because we have persuasion. Alright, so at level 2 we'll unlock our action surge and we can move on to level 3. At level 3 we get our subclass, and we also get a racial spell for the Githyanki if you chose to go as a Githyanki as well, which is the Githyanki Psionics Jump, which is basically enhanced leap that they get for free once per long rest, which is a pretty nice mobility spell that you can have. For the subclass we're going as a Eldritch Knight, of course, and then for cantrips. Now, because we have abysmally low intelligence at this stage of the game, going any kind of accuracy or a spell save DC roll cantrip is kind of pointless, because you will probably most likely not hit ever. So there is one really good cantrip, which is kind of made the Eldritch Knights be top of the class subclasses now, and it's the Booming Blade. We're gonna go with the Booming Blade because this takes your weapon accuracy roll and it applies the Booming Blade effect. On top of that, at level 5 and level 9, it adds 1d8 to your direct damage, and then 2d8 to the direct damage, and then 3d8 at level 9 to the post damage when they move. So it's a really amazing one for melee characters. Then for your second cantrip, if this is your main phase of the party, you could take Friends. This is going to help you with dialogue on top of your astral knowledge racial feature. Or if you're not the tanky, you'll probably go with this because getting free advantage on charisma checks is great against the non-hostile creatures in dialogue. Just beware that if you are caught enchanting these characters, so if you stop concentrating or that these 10 turns expire, basically they're going to accuse you of enchanting them. So to be safe, when you cast this on somebody, leave the area, stop concentrating, and then come back in a few moments later so that they, when they come down, we're not looking for the person who enchanted them. Otherwise, if this is not the main phase of your party, I was just going for Light. Light is a great cantrip for use in Act 2. It's really easy to find a lot of the shadow enemies there because they like to hide in the obscured or heavily obscured areas, and this helps you counteract that. For the spells, as always, we're going with the two basic Eldritch Knight spells that I always use in my opinion, and these are probably the best. Shield gives you +5 to your armor class as a reaction, so you can make your enemies miss you. It also gives you the immunity to magic missile damage, which is quite great. Then for the second one is the magic missile itself. It's a 2 to 5 damage guaranteed, so these missiles always hit their target unless they of course have magic armor shield themselves, so then they're gonna be of course nullifying the damage. But this is a great spell for finishing off low health enemies, especially in the early game, because in the early game is the moment where it happens when you can just miss a bunch of times in a row on a one or two health enemy. So this is great for basically counteracting that. For the expanded spells, all right, so we could start off with getting some of the enchantment illusion spells right now, even though we will not be using them because of the extremely low intelligence. Instead, you could pick up also utility spells like the protection from evil and good or enhanced sleep, since you get one as a Githyanki. But if you're not a Githyanki, I would suggest getting a enhanced sleep regardless, because if you cast this outside of combat, it's a ritual spell, so it's free and it's gonna help you with your mobility greatly. So we're gonna be picking up the enhanced sleep for now. At level 4, we get to choose another spell, and here we are going to go with the protection from evil and good, another utility spell that's great. It works against the aberrations, celestials, elementals, fae, fiends, and undead. It makes those targets immune to, basically, so that you cannot be charmed, frightened, or possessed by them, and also they have disadvantage on attack rolls against you. So it's very useful, especially in those later acts when you fight some of the fiends and faes as well, also undead in the Act 2. So it's useful basically throughout the entire Act 2. For the replace spells, we need to replace any. For our first feat, we're going to go with the ability movement +2 into strength. It's going to boost our combat and also movement capabilities. Either at this point or level 5, you could go and deal with Auntie Ethel to get another +1 to your strength to have a nice 20. And then in Act 2, you can get the Potion of Everlasting Vigor to go up to a pretty good 22. Though for the Act 3, for the Mirror of Loss, I would suggest you pick up Intelligence instead. The reason we want to get higher intelligence is not because of the necessarily higher spell save DC, but so that we have extra spell slots as a wizard when we multiclass to a wizard subclass. Because every 2 intelligence points gives you an additional spell slot. This is why it would be kind of important. At level 5 we get our extra attack, and we also get our racial Misty Step spell as a Githyanki, which is pretty good because of course probably the best mobility spell in the game. Bonus action lets you teleport anywhere that is an unoccupied space that you can see. Finally, at level 6, we gain our second feat, and here, since we are still focusing primarily on melee combat and not really spells all that much, because we're missing one crucial piece of equipment, we want Savage Dagger. You could get away with Great Weapon Master, but because we're gonna be rolling a lot of the psychic damage through our ring, through our weapon, and through our boots, if you're a tanky, of course, I think Savage Dagger is better here, because what it does is when making melee weapon attacks, you roll your damage die twice and use the highest result, therefore increasing your damage on average. And it works with various additional damage dice that you can get for your weapon attacks. At level 7, here we would get the War Magic feature, but we don't need it because we are not casting our cantrips that much, except the Moving Blade, of course. But what we're going to do instead, because we want to have a higher spell slot capacity, so up to 4th level spells, and also we want to be able to learn more spells from spell scrolls, we're going to go with the Wizard. What Wizard does for us it's gonna give us some access to cantrips. It's gonna give us the Arcane Recovery, so we can replenish one first level spell slot. It's gonna go up to I believe 3, because we are starting a little late, or maybe 2. I misremember, but I think it's up to level 2. But anyway, for our cantrips here. Now here you could start getting some of the more damaging cantrips if you wish, because you're gonna be getting soon. You should be in Act 2, I believe, right now, or next level. And you can then get the helmet that you need. But what I like to get is, since you're going to Act 2, you could pick up Light here. You could pick up the Shocking Grasp, since you're going for melee. Shocking Grasp is also nice for accessing a secret area in the Worm's Rock in Act 3. And then for the last cantrip, we could take something like Firebolt to fire up barrels. You could also take Bone Chill, which is going to prevent enemies from healing if you hit them with it. And then, of course, Ray of Frost if you have wet synergy with somebody in your party that then this can get benefits from, because it's gonna deal double damage. But since I believe I was using a ring for light in this character's example for this Act 2, I didn't take light, although again you can just go with, I'm gonna take Bone Chill and Firebolt instead, because I like preventing enemies from healing. Then of course firing up barrels. Then for the spells here, we can immediately pick up the Tasha's Hideous Laughter. It can be useful for us in the early, not in the early game, but it can be useful to us as a level 1 spell for disabling a single enemy and preventing them from moving, because they end up laughing, and then basically they're disabled until they succeed a saving throw, or if you attack them, you will basically proc their saving throw roll every time they get hit. Then for the other spells, we don't really need necessarily anything here. So what I would suggest is you just pick up whichever ones you may like. Disguise Self is nice for the Middle of Laws. Expeditious Retreat is actually pretty good as a really cheap level 1 spell that you can cast to gain concentrations if you have concentration synergy from your equipment. And let's take Long Strider in case you don't have a Long Strider in your party. Now, because we have only 10 intelligence, we have only 1 spell slot. So we're gonna be able to equip only 1 spell, but once we start increasing our intelligence and get extra wizard levels, we're gonna be getting additional spell slots, so it's not gonna be too much of a big deal. At level 8, we gain our subclass, and here you could go with the most vanilla option, which is the enchantment, the Evocation, which if you have Thunder Wave equipped, you basically get the ability where your Evocation spells do not target allies and they automatically succeed saving throws. But instead, what I went with was the Enchantment School. This gives you the Hypnotic Gaze, charm and incapacitate a creature. It cannot attack you, it cannot act. You can maintain your Hypnotic Gaze each turn to extend its duration. This is not too great, it's only 2 turns, and you have to basically, on your first turn you activate it, and then on your second turn you have to do it again, otherwise it's gonna break. But at level 6 we're gonna get the Charm, which is basically similar to the Mind Flare charm, where if a target attacks you, you can choose as a reaction to charm them, and then if they fail the saving throw, they have to pick a new target. I think it's quite on par with the kind of thematics of the character. Illusion, you could go as well, but I don't think it's as great. It gives you cast Minor Illusion. I think at level 6 it gives you the ability to permanently, basically once per long rest cast, see invisibility for free. So if you value that, you can go with this, or if you have a different preference, you go with that, but I'm gonna go with the Enchantment School. Then for the spells, let's just equip. Okay. We can just take anything here. We take Sleep and I don't know, Featherfall, because it doesn't really matter. We unlocked another spell slot, and here I was just keeping Expeditious Retreat because we are going to be having concentration synergy items, so Expeditious Retreat is useful. And we could take Tasha's Hideous Laughter until we get something better. As you can see, I already learned some spells from scrolls on this character already. Then for the additional spells as a wizard, of course, Misty Step. We get one for free as a tanky, but having more is not a detriment, so we're gonna take another Misty Step. Full Person, probably one of the best level 2 spells in game as well, or against humanoids, that is. You hold them still, basically. If they fail, you hold them still, and then anything within 10 feet has critical hits. even ranged weapons as well. And we're going to be equipping that immediately. Actually, we're going to be getting the Misty Step and Hold Person instead of Tasha's Hideous Laughter. So now you could say the Expeditionary Retreat is reserved for first level spells. And of course, Shield. At level 10, we unlock an additional cantrip. And this is basically at the very tail end of Act 2. So you don't really need light anymore. You can just take a damage cantrip or maybe minor illusion if you want to. I'm just going to take the Ray of Frost just because if you have a synergy with wet status effect. You could also take Acid Splash for AoE damage. So yeah, basically up to you. You have about quite a few choices here. Then for our additional spells here, the Enlarge Reduce is good on Eldritch Knights because if you enlarge yourself, you deal additional 1d4 weapon damage on top of having strength saving throws and checks advantage. So we're going to be taking that as another concentration synergetic spell. In case we don't want to cast Enchantment Illusion, we can cast this for just dishing out damage. Then for the other spell, you could take Blur, but I think we'll have so many concentration spells. We're going to pick up Mirror Image for now. We can take Blur later if we really want to. For the prepared spell, since we have access to level 2, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take Enlarge Reduce, or if we require damage. For our third and last feat, if you have a choice, you could pick up the Great Weapon Master right now for that sweet extra 10 additional damage. It's quite powerful, especially since you have Hold Person, and you can hold Humanoid still without getting the penalty to accuracy. So what this does is, when we land a critical hit or kill a target with a melee weapon attack, we can make another melee weapon attack using a bonus action for that turn. Attacks with melee weapons we are proficient with and are wielding in both hands can deal additional 10 damage at the cost of 5 accuracy. So basically less accuracy but more damage. But again, if you hold person somebody, this accuracy penalty does not matter. And you can toggle this on or off. You just have to open your character sheet and then find the status and drag it into your hotbar. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go for the ability improvement and +2 into intelligence. This is going to give us an extra spell slot and +1 to spell save DC and attack rolls, which can be helpful, but we want namely additional spell slots. At level 11, we gain the 3rd level wizard spells, and here, since we are an Eldritch Knight, you could legit just pick up Haste as well. Haste is a great one because what this is going to do is going to allow you to cast additional spells. For you would primarily want this for the additional cast of the Booming Blade. And it's also going to help you farm up your Arcane Acuity even higher as well. Just be aware though, if you cast another concentration spell, you will become lethargic. So this one you wouldn't use as much as you would with other Eldritch Knights, but it's nice to have it regardless. Otherwise, you could pick up the Fear and Hypnotic Pattern, but since we're on level 11, we can pick it up next level up. So I'm going to go with Fear for this one. Now, for the 2 additional spells here, we're going to take Haste, of course, and Fear. At level 12, we unlock the Instinctive Charm. Like I mentioned, charm an enemy attacking you, they will attack a new target if possible as a reaction. So same thing as the Mind Flare Charm, just for the enchantment wizard school, basically. And then for the additional spells, I'm going to pick up the Hypnotic Pattern here. You could, of course, just take Fireball. Fireball is always nice. It's really a detriment. Far as it goes for enchantment illusion spells at this level, we don't really have any left. You could pick up the Slow spell, which is a transmutation spell. Slow is very powerful. At level 3, you can cast it on 6 creatures, and they have halved speed. Their armor class and dexterity throws are reduced by 2, which is pretty powerful as well. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up Blur instead. But again, it wouldn't be a mistake to take Slow. Then for the prepared spells, here we're going to take Confusion. Confusion is kind of like a smaller radius but upgraded version of Hypnotic Pattern. Hypnotic Pattern basically hypnotizes targets for 2 turns, where they cannot act, they cannot move, they cannot do anything. Although you can hit yourself with this, which you wouldn't want to because you're just going to skip your turn and break concentration immediately after, so you kind of waste a turn with this. While Confusion only hits hostile creatures, and it can make them either wander around aimlessly, they can skip their turns, they can attack their allies, or they can attack you if you're unlucky, which probably happens more often than not, but still a pretty good one because of the rather big AoE. Alright, so that is it for levels. I want to see you in the equipment section. Alright, so here we are in the equipment section. And before we start with the equipment, basically if you have 14 intelligence, you will have 8 spell slots for the wizard. And since of course we are a wizard, you can easily switch these out for whichever spells you may prefer or which you need for a specific situation. I also learned, for example, dark vision here. It's nice, especially if you are a race that doesn't have dark vision naturally. But anyway, now for the equipment itself. Let's start with the headgear. Here we have the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. Whenever you deal damage with a weapon attack, you gain Arcane Acuity for 2 turns. What this does is, for each stack, you gain +1 to spell attack rolls and spell save DC. So basically, this stacks up to, I believe, 8 or 10 times. So you can increase your spell save DC by 8 or 10 times. Because normally, right now, if you look, we have only a 16. This is from our base. Base is 8, intelligence is 2, so it's 10, proficiency is 14, and then from our amulet it's 16. So from the helmet you can get up 16 plus 8, which will be 24, which is very powerful, right? We'll have some top tier spell save DC without really having high intelligence. So it's a pretty nice helmet to have for martial spellcasters with low intelligence. I wouldn't really take any alternatives for the helmet because you kind of need this to be able to cast spells on your enemies. So yeah, we're gonna be sticking with that helmet. For the cloak, I went with the Nymph Cloak. This gives us 1 dominate spell per long rest, dominate person per long rest. You can find 2 of these cloaks actually, so you can have 2 of these per long rest. Then we have the Cloak of Displacement. Basically, at the start of a turn, it gives you the effects of blur, so enemies have disadvantage on attack rolls against you. Pretty useful cloak. We have the Cloak of Protection, armor class saving throws +1 if you want extra armor and saving throws. Kind of useful with one of the armors that we have, but then we have the Cloak of the Weave. Gain +1 to spell save DC and attack rolls, increasing your spell save DC even further if you think it is low, although it shouldn't be. And then we have finally the Vivacious Cloak. You gain extra 8 temporary hit points after casting a spell in melee, which basically, since you're going to be using the Booming Blade every turn, you're going to have passive 8 temporary hit points healing every single turn with that cloak if you take damage. For the armor, I went with the Armor Persistence. You only incoming damage is used by 2. You gain Resistance and Blade Ward. It's going to help you with saving throws. Then we have also the Adamantine Splint Armor. Incoming damage goes by 2. When a melee attack hits you, you send the target reeling for 3 turns. And for each stack of reeling, they have -1 to attack roll penalty. So they have a -3 to hit you again. Attackers also can't land critical hits on the wearer. So a really nice armor there too. You could also pick up the Armor of Agility. Adds your full dexterity modifier to armor class. Additionally, this armor does not impose disadvantage on stealth checks. This would be a 19, but since it's, yeah, so it will give you a total of 19 since we only have 14 dex, so this armor is a lot better on high dexterity characters, but we would want it because of the +2 to saving throws. And this is important because we're running with the Resonance Stone, but we'll get to that in a bit. Finally, the armor I've been running through, or with most of the game, was the Psionic Ward armor, since I'm a Githyanki. So if this item detects that the wearer is a Gith, they have resistance to psychic damage. So it nullifies the damage vulnerability from the Resonance Stone. Whenever the wearer succeeds a saving throw against the spell, they regain 1d4 hit points. Not too amazing, but alright. Thematically, I went with this, since of course I was a Githyanki. For the gloves, it's kind of, we have to go with the Brain Drain gloves. Whenever we deal psychic damage, we also inflict Mental Fatigue for 2 turns. What Mental Fatigue does is, for each turn, it gives a -1 penalty to Wisdom, Intelligence, Charisma saving throws. So right off the bat, if you hit an enemy once, they get a -2 to saving throws, for example, against our whole person. And then when the creature fails the Wisdom, Intelligence, Charisma saving throw while having 5 or more stacks of this condition, the entity takes 1d4 psychic damage and is no longer mentally fatigued. But that's not a big deal because you can easily apply it right after again. For the boots, I went with the Boots of Psionic Movement. When a Githyanki casts Fly, their next melee weapon attack deals additional 1d4 psychic damage, so we now should have, in theory, well, technically it's going to be 3d4 because we have one ring that does that as well. So it's nice for that if you're a Githyanki, or if you disguise yourself as a Githyanki. It gives us also the Githborn Flying Boots, which bestows the flying ability upon us. Keep in mind though, this effect from the boots does not work with the Mind Flayer ability flying. I guess it's considered as a different type of flying, so it doesn't work. But if you drink a potion of flying, it's gonna work the same. So you can use the ability once per long rest, or you can just drink a potion of flying. Alternatively, if you're not a Githyanki or you're not interested in these boots, you can as always go with the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. These boots make you immune to Inwebbed, Entangled, Ensnared, and you can't sleep on grease or ice, and also gives us 1 Misty Step per short rest. Alternatively as well, you can go with the Boots of Striding. When you cast a spell that requires concentration, you gain momentum for 1 turn, and while we are concentrating, which should be basically always, we cannot be knocked prone or move against our will, which is quite powerful. For the amulet, I went with the Amulet of the Devout. This gives us plus 2 to spell save DC, so it helps with enemies failing the saving throws against our spells. Although the second effect doesn't do anything for us because it's a cleric ability. Alternatively, for the mental protection, you could pick up the Amulet of the Harpers or the Face Amulet's Amulet. These give you advantage on Wisdom saving throws. The difference is the Amulet of the Harpers gives you Shield spell once per long rest, and the Face Amulet's Amulet gives you additional Intelligence and Charisma saving throws advantage. Reason you would want this, again, the Resonance Stone, what it does is it gives you this Steeped in Bliss. Basically, the entity has advantage on physical checks and disadvantage on mental saving throws, and the entity is also vulnerable to psychic damage. So if you wear one of these two amulets, you essentially cancel out the disadvantage on Wisdom with advantage, so it's just a flat roll. And then if you're wearing the Sonic Ward armor, or if you're using the Silver Soul of the Astral Planes, you negate the vulnerability to psychic damage, because if you equip Armor of Persistence, you can see here that I have the vulnerability to psychic damage. Then for the rings, we have the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. After hitting a creature with a weapon attack, you can cast illusion or enchantment spells as a bonus action. So this is where that pretty good synergy comes from. We inflict brain drain, or we inflict mental fatigue on the target. We also boost our spell casting with the Arcane Acuity, and then we can cast a illusion or enchantment spell for a bonus action, which is going to allow us on the same turn to either crowd control a group of enemies or potentially one enemy with hold person, or if you use spell scrolls, the bonus action enchantment illusion also works with the spell scrolls, which is pretty good. So that allows you to cast hold monster as a bonus action, for example. For the second ring, we have the Strange Conduit Ring. While concentrating on a spell, the wearer's weapon attacks deal additional 1d4 psychic damage. So now we would have a total of 3d4 psychic damage with our greatsword. For the weapons, here we have the Voss's Silver Sword. This weapon grants a 1d4 bonus to damage and attack rolls against Githyanki, Aberrations, Fiends, and Elementals. A pretty decent sword there. It's a challenge +2, so it has a little bit higher accuracy and damage because of that. You can find a lot of Fiends in one area in Act 3. Githyanki you can find also in one area of Act 3 or towards the very end of Act 3. Elementals, not really, and Aberrations, as well you can find Aberrations as well, since the Mind Flayers are considered Aberrations. This also gives you 1 cast per short rest of Wrathful Smite. It deals extra 1d6 psychic damage. It possibly frightens the target, so they should have disadvantage on this because the Frighten is a mental saving throw because of our Resonance Stone. Alternatively, for the early game, if the game decides to load in, we have the Githyanki Gatesword. If you're a Githyanki, you deal extra 1d4 psychic damage with every single attack, which is pretty good. Then there is an upgraded version of it, which is the Soulbreaker Greatsword. When wielded by Githyanki, this deals additional 1d4 psychic damage, the same as the previous one, but we gain also +2 to the initiative rolls, which is pretty nice. And on top of that, we gain the Soulbreaker. Rend the enemy's body and soul and possibly stun them, which is a pretty powerful one. It has also a quite high spell save DC for that stun. Then for the sword that you would probably use if you were not a Githyanki, and you would probably run before you get the Voss's Silver Sword, because Voss's Silver Sword doesn't require it to be a Githyanki, which is pretty nice, is the one you would run before it would be the Blade of Pressed Souls. It deals 1d4 psychic damage, and it gives you the Crowning Strike. Basically, an initial strike of the dead that fell to your blade, and possibly instill Crown of Madness to the target. So it's another mental saving throw debuff there. Mainly would want this for the extra psychic damage. You could also use Ketheric's Hammer or the Blade of... the one that Nier wields, you could use those. Although Nier's blade is a rapier, so it's one-handed, so it wouldn't work with your great weapon fighting, but the Ketheric's Hammer would work because you can dual wield his hammer. And then finally, probably the best weapon of war here, but it's kind of gets boring running the best weapons in the game, right? Because they're so powerful. Is the Silver Sword of the Astral Plane. It deals extra 1d6 psychic damage with every single attack if you're a Githyanki. It gives you the Gift-born Psionics. A Githyanki holding this weapon has advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws, and resistance to psychic damage and cannot be charmed. A very powerful sword that basically counters the Mind Flayer charm. It also works the same for what our armor does, and also it kind of steps in the amulet slot. So with this sword, optimal build will probably be something like this, where you're both immune, you're not vulnerable to psychic damage. You also are not having disadvantage on mental saving throws, and of course on top of that you cannot be charmed. Then for our ranged weapon, I went with the Hell Rider Longbow. Mainly as a stat stick, this gives us +3 bonus to initiative and attack rolls, initiative and advantage on perception ability checks, not attack rolls. The second effect we don't really worry about because we're not really going to be shooting with it that much. We're really wanting the initiative. For the alternatives, we have the Bow Awareness, same reason, extra +1 to initiative. Then for the other ones is the Gander's Aspiration and the Hunting Shortbow, namely advantage against monstrosity type enemies, which are relatively common, especially in Act 3. Basically, the difference is this one gives you an additional, which I would say is probably better because it gives you an additional spell that you can concentrate on, which is the Hunter's Mark, one spell long rest. While the other one is a lot better on high dexterity characters because it gives you Sacred Munition, which is very useful against the undead enemy. And then finally, for some of our additional items, as mentioned earlier, the Resonance Stone, a really useful one, really powerful item for you to have, especially since it's going to give enemies disadvantage against your enchantment spells and illusion spells as well. So a really useful item to get. You get this in the Moonrise Tower's basement, basically, when you are at the final stretch of Act 2. And then for our elixirs, Elixir of Pillar's Focus is great because it gives you advantage on concentration saving throws and also advantage against being charmed. But again, if you have the Silver Sword or Astral Plane, you don't need to worry about that. Otherwise, it's nice against Mind Flayers as well for that advantage. And then finally, the Potion of Flying, namely because I was using the Boots of Sonic Movement so that we can get that free 1d, not free, but that useful 1d4 psychic damage with this character. Alright, so that is it for the equipment section. I will see you in the combat showcase. Alright, so here we are, the Flaming Fists barracks for yet another battle showcase. Now, before combat started, I did use an Elixir of Peerless Focus, and I also yeeted a Potion of Flying onto this character just because I forgot to drink it beforehand. I also didn't start concentrating on a spell, but that's not too much of a big deal because we can do it right after. Basically, how you'd want to open up fights with this character is you fly into your first target so that we get the Flying Strike ability, extra 1d4 psychic damage, and since we have enemies steeped in bliss because of the Resonance Stone, they are vulnerable to psychic damage and also they have disadvantage on our mental saving throws. So what we can do, for example, use the Booming Blade to deal quite a lot of damage to him. We almost deal equal amount of damage of psychic as weapon damage because of that vulnerability, since it's that the 2d4 is basically doubled, and we rolled highest result thanks to our Savage Attacker. We rolled a 14, relatively high, because we only deal 1d10 plus 2 from the enchantment plus 6 from strength, and then thunder damage is 2d8. We rolled the maximum there. Actually, no, that would be 16. We rolled quite high there as well. So pretty good damage. He is almost half HP. We also gain the Arcane Acuity, of course, and if we take a look at our spellbook to the wizard, we gain that +2 from Arcane Acuity. So he also has Mental Fatigue, so that lowers his saving throws by 2. We can attack him again. Of course, if you really want to min-max the damage, you would fly again somewhere next to him to trigger the Githyanki Flying Strike again. But I'm not going to worry about that because it's only sake of the showcase, and these aren't particularly dangerous enemies right now. So now, since we attacked him twice, we have 4 Arcane Acuity. We should have 20 spell save DC. Plus, anybody around us will have disadvantage. What we can do is cast something like Confusion. We could try to hit... Now, she's probably going to have the highest chance of succeeding because she has Proficiency and High Wisdom. But if I hit, for example, these 3 guys, which all have 99% chance of failing, we cannot really cast it on these guys in here because he's 90% and we can't really target 85%. There we go. So it's gonna get higher the more combat progresses because we're gonna have more Arcane Acuity. So let's cast these guys, and Since they're confused now, they'll be basically disabled. They might attack us, but also they might just skip the turns, or well, God knows what they'll do. But anyway, we should then can use our action surge, and we can keep attacking. Now, because we're concentrating, we should deal additional 1d4 damage. Now, can I do this without triggering opportunity attacks? Not really. So let's just take this guy out. And then let's use another fly ability, and we'll fly right next to him again, which triggers our flying strike. And let's hit him. Hopefully we don't miss. Nice, we didn't miss. We dealt a crit, which was quite lucky. But regardless, we would deal 3d4 psychic damage, which would turn out to be doubled. Quite powerful, right? So that's basically it with this character, right? You can disable some of the most highest resistance bosses in the game with this, especially if you stack up your Arcane Acuity to the maximum, which is 10, which is I believe 8. And if you take a look at our spell save DC now, it's 24. So something like, for example, Raphael or some of the other bosses, you can easily cast Hold Monster on and just start unloading on them, because it's going to be almost impossible for them to succeed a saving throw. Although do keep in mind, somebody like Raphael, he has a special effect where after he skips one turn because he is disabled by, let's say, Hold Monster, he immediately saves and disables that effect, so you have to cast it on him again. But it shouldn't be a big deal, because you can quite easily get a lot of scrolls of Hold Monster in Act 3. But anyway, that is it for the build. I hope you enjoyed. I would appreciate it if you leave a like, comment, subscribe for more Baldur's Gate 3 content, and I'll see you in the next one.